Next time, we'll take a cruise. Hello, my name is Will, and you're listening to Exploding Helicopter, the podcast which worships films where helicopters explode. Now, monks have never been the stars of the silver screen. Most commonly cited in historical dramas, they act as a kind of period window dressing and are generally portrayed as stout, jolly fellows whose love of God is matched only by their love of mead. True, Asian martial arts films in the 70s and 80s often featured monks of the Shaolin variety, kicking God-fearing arse whilst dispensing cryptic wisdom. But in Europe, monks have only ever been a marginal presence. So it's against this unpromising backdrop that we come to the film we're reviewing on this show. One that bravely smashes the stone tablets of convention and preaches a whole new gospel of monk cinema. So we're looking at Lasco Death Train. Now, my guest today has promised to enter into the spirit of the show by dressing in a scratchy brown habit and by shaving the hair from the top of his scalp. Let's just hope he hasn't taken a vow of silence, or this could be a really tough show. With me today is Doug Tilley from Eric Roberts is the Man. How are you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great. I'm going to guess that you got to beep that word in the title of my podcast.
Yeah, well, just don't remind listeners too often of what your podcast is. Otherwise, it's going to turn into a real beep fest.
Look, iTunes made me censor it, so I think I can censor it in my own speech. I know I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to be decked out in my monk gear. I've never felt closer to the whole kind of monkdom thing. I didn't realize that they could kick so much butt.
Well, this is certainly a kind of a very different type of movie. If you're just used to, maybe you've watched In the Name of the Rose. I think it is the Sean Connery, Christian Slater kind of sleuthing monk movie. This is a whole different kettle of fish.
Oh, I would say so. Yes, it is a very different kettle of fish. That's well said. And also, I think we should at least mention off the bat that this is a German movie, and I think we should both have a shot at the German title of the movie, which is Im Auftrag des Vatikans. That's got to be pretty close, right?
You sounded like you're a native German there.
Yeah, I just tried to up the anger level a little bit. But no, Lasco Death Train is a very unusual title, and I feel like I keep forgetting it. The Death Train part, of course, I remember every time I think about this movie. But the fact that Lasco, and of course we're going to get into this, is one of the characters' names, I feel like there was like a translation, and they're like, we are going to call this movie Death Train. And then they found out that there's like a half dozen other movies called Death Train. And they're like, well, just stick the guy's name at the top of it, and that'll be fine. And it's so awkward to see it written down. It actually is kind of amusing in and itself just to have a title like that.
Well, there is a line in this movie which made me think, actually, a better title for this film would have been Fist of God.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
It would have, it fit naturally with the film. It's punchy, it's short, it sounds intriguing, mysterious, sounds like there's going to be some action and violence in there. So, that's a much better title for the film.
Now this movie, and I hope we're not getting ahead of ourselves, this movie was later turned into a television series based on this main character. And I think that TV series might have translated to Fist of God, which just reinforces what you just said.
Well, before we get any deeper into the movie, I thought I might just ask you, have you got any particular favourite monks in movies?
Oh, what a great question. Let's see. Favorite monks. Well, there's been so many. I'm going to go with the classic Friar Tuck performance, to me, is Porky Pig in the classic Looney Tunes shorts featuring Daffy Duck as Robin Hood. Porky Pig, a great monk. And, of course, Tony Shalhoub as Monk, the television series. Honestly, when I think of monks and movies, I forgot about the category of monks I actually do have a lot of interest in, which is like Shaolin monks, which, of course, there's certainly plenty of martial arts movies which feature Shaolin monks, but the one that immediately comes to mind is Enter the 36th Chamber of Shaolin, which sort of kind of, I think, brought that concept to the West to some extent. And boy, if I was going to be ranking my favorite monk movies, which is apparently what we're doing now, that would probably be right at the top.
Well, let's move this conversation along from monk movies.
No, let's not. Let's keep talking about monks in movies.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to insist that we move along. Move this conversation along.
You're the host.
Okay. This is my show. Actually, shut up, Doug. But
So that's what that feels like.
Now, I'm going to move this conversation along and let's talk about helicopter explosions in film. Now, obviously, I have chosen to dedicate my life to celebrating this minor trope of largely action movies. But I wanted to find out from you, as you're a guest on this show, what do you think of helicopter explosions in film? Do you think they're a good thing? Or,
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding? Look, the thing about a helicopter that makes it so unique and wonderful as an explosive kind of center is that it can hover, right? It's not flying quickly overhead. It's not kind of stationary like a lot of cars are, or even kind of moving at a fair clip. But like it can be in almost any position, right? It can hover in front of a building. When I think of the explosion from, I think it's Stone Cold, where the motorcycle goes into maybe the classic helicopter explosion, right? And this isn't an explosion, but when the Terminator and Terminator 2, the liquid metal goes into it and makes the guy jump out of the helicopter. You can hover it in front of a building. You can have it moving at a fair clip, maybe even right in front of a train in some capacity. So look, if you can get a helicopter and you can fill it with some sort of explosive device and you can blow it up, there's also like pieces of metal that can go in any sort of direction, right? And dangerous pieces of metal. Boy, it just seems like the perfect thing to blow up. I can see why you would base a podcast around it, because I would never get tired of watching helicopters explode in a variety of different ways, which is a good thing for the movie that we're talking about here.
It certainly is. And if you are tired of watching helicopters explode in movies, then you are tired of life. That's that's a credo I live by, Doug.
Yeah. In fact, I think you would be an idiot to disagree with that.
Well, I think it's time we put down the communion wine and wafers and got stuck into Lasco. So let's listen to the trailer with a wonderfully portentous voiceover.
On the way to escape the curse of memories. Looking for inner peace. He decides to serve God.
Lasko is the ideal man for us.
Pugnus Day? What's that?
It's a secret order.
And he encounters the devil.
My name for today is Lucifer.
Your Eminence, it's the pilgrim train to Lourdes. We have a situation.
Maybe they want to hijack it.
What did they steal from the safe?
Death Train, or Lasco Death Train as it's sometimes called, came out in 2005. After stealing a deadly virus from a government laboratory, a group of terrorists try to elude the police by making their getaway on a train full of pilgrims who are off to see the Pope. Unfortunately for them, a former soldier turned monk called Lasko is also on board. He is being lined up as the newest recruit to a secret order dedicated to protecting the church. So when the terrorists threaten to unleash the virus on thousands of pilgrims, Lasco must decide whether he will remain a man of peace or whether he will become the Fist of God. This film is a German made-for-TV movie, so there aren't really any familiar faces in the cast. Lasco is played by a German martial artist called Mathis Landwehr. However, the villain is played by the great Arnold Vosloo, who I'm sure you'll remember from Hard Target, The Mummy, and the notorious canon fantasy adventure Gore. Death Train has a 4.3 rating on IMDb and a 28% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Despite such negativity, the film obviously had some fans because in 2009 a TV series showing Lasco's further adventures protecting the church came out. So all that is by way of background. Doug, what did you make of Death Train?
I think it depends on your expectations going into it. This is no way going to be as slick as your U.S. high-budgeted action movie, but it does make up for what it lacks in production value with lots of fight scenes, big explosions, and a kind of a unique concept. Just the idea of this train full of monks and pilgrims and the kind of drama that you find in it. There's obviously lots of opportunities for comic relief as well. It does kind of feel like the pilot for a TV series because it does set up those kind of supporting characters. It does kind of set up at the very end, especially that, okay, Lasco, he is like the head fist of God. Boy, that would have been a better title. You're absolutely right. And, you know, when the Pope needs an ass kicked, he knows who to call. He calls Lasco, who, like you said, is an ex-soldier who is obviously suffering from some PTSD as well, but that is not something that we're going to care about here. And he has a slightly overweight monk friend who's kind of his second, right? That he's going to be the guy who kind of backs him up in all of this action in the future. I mean, I'm not going to say that I would sit down and watch however many episodes of that TV series. I think there's 2 series of it that existed, but I can see how it was a concept that could carry a TV series. That said, the religious bent is what is most interesting about this movie, because you don't usually see that in action movies.
You certainly don't. And, I'd kind of agree with a lot of what you said there, because I think it is very entertaining. And I think if you've got a sense of humour, you can really enjoy this movie. And as you say, I think the religious premise of this movie is the most sort of interesting aspect of this movie, because you have the central character here is a guy called Lasco. And as you mentioned, he's a former soldier who's haunted by what he's seen serving in the military, and he's then become a monk to escape his past. But as we find out at the beginning of this movie, he's been earmarked as a new recruit for Pugnus Day, who are this secret organization that protects the church. But poor old Lasco, he does seem a rather strange person for them to be zeroing in on, because he just wants to live a quiet, peaceful life, and he's trying to deal with his PTSD. It felt to me a little bit unchristian that they were so hell-bent on recruiting him to this organization.
I mean, I don't disagree, but then again, I do feel like the Catholic Church is kind of built around contradiction and look, I don't want to get too controversial, but also hypocrisy in a certain way, right? I mean, he does seem to fit the Christian model of, turn the other cheek. He wants to live, like you said, a very nonviolent life. But honestly, shouldn't he be able to do that, right? Shouldn't that be, that seems like a valid, worthwhile goal. He's someone who was in war, is suffering from PTSD. He wants to live a quiet life of peace. That's why he became a monk. Like, it's the reason he became a monk. He's like, I'm like going to give up the regular world because I just want to never have to deal with that again. And they literally force him back into this, right? I mean, it is sort of like he is supposed to be a Rambo figure, except without a First Blood movie where it kind of explores this PTSD in some detail, and we don't ever see him kind of break down outside of these kind of black and white visions of his experience in war. It does kind of imply that war is bad. However, violence is not bad in a right cause, which I guess is sort of it kind of goes along with a lot of well, I would say evangelical views of how the world works in 2018. But it does seem kind of contradictory at times. And I will say that despite the fact that Lasco jumps right into things once he's forced into it, which by the way takes about half the movie before he really kind of commits to the whole thing, almost falls off a train right before too. I would have liked to have seen even though he's shown to be very hesitant, I would have liked to have seen him kind of battle with that a little bit more. But then again, this is an action movie. It is not meant to be a strict, serious portrayal of a traumatized person kind of getting back into the game.
Well, there's a couple of other subplots in this film that I thought it might be interesting to sort of touch on. So the most prominent involves a young single mother who is on this train to see the Pope with her 10-year-old son who is terminally ill with a rare blood disorder. And I don't know, what did you make of this little boy here?
Well, this is a particularly annoying kid. I mean, look, there's a part like right at the beginning after his mom has made this kind of weird bungee jump protest against the church that like they're going to get on this train, which is basically their last gasp at some sort of resolution to this kid's disease, which is that they're going to pray to God and they're going to go on a pilgrimage, right? And that kid is so indecisive about ice cream that they almost miss it. Like they come really close to missing the train. And like and the kid was, and his voice, his voice is really irritating in this movie. And everything he does, he loves soccer. That's like, he's dying and he loves soccer. He's dying and he loves football. That is his defining attributes in this movie. But yeah, he absolutely sucks. And by the way, I know that we're not supposed to be thinking this, but there's 400 people on this train. Everyone's making a pilgrimage. Of those 400, how many do you think are probably terminally ill people who are going to this place in desperate need of some sort of a cure for a disease. Maybe 15, 20, 30. I like how we're focusing on these two people whose prayers are quote unquote answered, when how many other people on this train could also use that sort of help? I don't want to get into a big thing about it, but I also thought it was so amusing at the beginning when she makes that protest. The priest takes her in, and instead of like saying, we will assist you with the vast amounts of money that the church has available to them, instead, here's 2 train tickets. Go ask the Pope for some help.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you mention, how many who else might be on this train, who might need some medical help or some assistance from God, because we do have a couple of other passengers on this train who they're the sort of the comedy relief pairing. So there's one guy who is blind, and there's another guy who is he has a lot of problems walking. I think it seems to be because he's got gout, but he needs his.
They even mentioned that.
And they pop up regularly throughout this film, sort of commenting on the situation sort of going on around them. So there's a scene where Lasco is on top of the train, and he looks like he's about to fall off, and he's flapping around outside the window. But of course the blind man, he can't see him, but keeps sort of hearing something at the corner. And the other guy, who's his irritable friend, is just sort of you're imagining this, God, that's a good job you can't see anything. You'd be a nightmare. I don't know. It reminded me of another train-based movie, The Lady Vanishes, and I don't know if you remember the kind of comedy relief pairing in there of Charters and Caldecott, I think their names were.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that Hitchcock maybe even brought those characters back into. There's some other context where they're actually in another.
Had, those characters then were spun off, and they had their own series of movies.
That's right. And I mean, of course.
Would you like to see that happen with this pair?
Well, I was picturing that for the TV series, that wherever Lasco ends up, somehow these two characters are also there as well. And it just becomes this running joke that they end up like worldwide, internationally, just in the background, his own Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, wherever he ends up. So, I mean, yeah, look, they're not very funny. Let's just face it. Also, the idea that obviously this blind guy is going to a pilgrimage in the hopes that the Pope or whoever is going to cure his affliction. That's played pretty much for a complete joke. It's like, nah, sorry, you're stuck with that, but have fun on the way. I did think that they were going to play into the climax in some way, like that they were going to be there. Maybe they would be the ones who this is going to sound strange for those who haven't seen the movie, that they would pass out the communion wafers that have the antidote to the poison that is supposed to kill everybody. Like they would be a big part of that or something. But no, they are played purely for comic relief, and when they are no longer useful, the movie just kind of forgets about them.
Well, let's touch a little bit on kind of how this movie integrates sort of religion into this movie, because we've talked about this the kind of the subplots with this mom and her son looking for a miracle to save his life, but throughout the film there are some interesting little touches where the Christian faith is kind of woven into the film, and you've mentioned one of them already, where the vaccine for this lethal virus which is on board this train is passed out via the medium of religious wafers. What did you think of some of the other little sort of ways? There's one particularly very entertaining one. I want to see if you're going to mention it before I prompt you.
Oh, I probably won't. I mean, all I'm thinking about right now is the fact that the major theme of this movie is that prayer works sometimes, right? It says, like, even the priest at the very beginning. No, I think even Lasco says to the kid, he's like, you pray and it'll work sometimes, and that's kind of what you're supposed to take away from it. It's like, never give up faith, have unwavering faith that it could happen, that this miracle will come true, but it's also possible that it won't. So which is a kind of an odd perspective, but also the only, I was going to say realistic one, but the only one that kind of makes sense in the context of how the world actually works. But in terms of the are you talking specifically about the monk who gets shot and ends up stopping the bullet with, I mean, the classic stopping the bullet with the Bible, which also has some sort of medallion at the back of it that also keeps him from being killed. There was a lot of religious iconography. There's people crossing themselves and crossing others and things like that. And also the fact that outside the train, the people who are keeping an eye on the situation and making decisions about what's going to happen to the train, that involves a representative from the church there. And he is shown as being very pragmatic, while also getting angry at someone for making like literally the only decisions that they can make.
Well, the one bit of this film that I did want to mention with regards to, I guess, weaving its kind of religious theme into the script, but I guess also weaving a popular culture moment into the script is that there's this priest on board the train who is droning on prayers out to everybody on board, and Voslo comes along and grabs the mic off him in order to make an announcement to everybody on board. And there's a
oh
reasons.
Yes, oh my gosh, what an odd thing. Okay, I'm going to let you describe it, but a musical cue that was completely unexpected.
Yeah, so Voslo grabs this microphone and makes an announcement to the kind of everyone on board the train, where he basically is parodying or kind of paraphrasing the lyrics to the Rolling Stones song "Sympathy for the Devil." So he grabs this microphone and sort of says, "Please allow me to introduce myself, and you can call me Lucifer." And there's a very clearly, obviously, this film didn't have a big budget. Clearing "Sympathy for the Devil" for use in this film was never going to happen. But some enterprising musician has cobbled together a similar but legally not similar enough cover version of "Sympathy for the Devil" to play in the background, which I found that one of the more inspired moments of this film.
Oh man, when the kind of yelps that kind of happened at the beginning of "Sympathy for the Devil," like a weirdly imitated, not like you said, just a little off version of that intro started playing, I'm like, what is happening? There's no way that they're going to play that song here. And it is just play as kind of a light instrumental in the background. But yeah, in terms of odd moments, and it kind of like, I never kind of positioned this villain character as being so kind of Satan-like. That this is more like a battle against evil as opposed to a battle against, I don't know, capitalism or something like that. But that kind of reinforces it to kind of really take us back to that traditional faith-based structure of a movie. Again, not that I've seen many faith-based action movies in the past. Hey, but there's a few of them out there.
Well, let's talk about the action in this movie, because that's essentially what this film is attempting to do. It has got some pretty spectacular action sequences in this, despite the fact that it is a very low-budget movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it helps a lot that the actor who plays Lasco, Mathis Landwehr, he's obviously a very talented martial artist. We see him training at the beginning. Of course we do. And in terms of hand-to-hand combat, I think he's done a lot of Hollywood movies. I think he worked on Speed Racer and things like that. So he's worked with the Wachowskis. So it's a case where you have a obviously very physically talented person. You have a lot of people involved in this who are stunt performers. So the explosions are going to be bigger and better than you'll see in your average straight-to-video or made-for-TV action movie. And the fight scenes, there obviously has been some care put into them. I don't know if a lot of the people on the other end have the same sort of fighting skill as Lasco does in real life. But there's two lengthy fights on top of a train, and both of them are pretty impressive. I think maybe doing two of them is overkill, but one might say that having two helicopter explosions might be overkill, but that didn't stop them in this case either. That said, look, they're impressive. Particularly there's one really good hand-to-hand fight scene that takes place in one of the train carriages. Lasco has this great unique move where he steals people's belts while he's fighting them. I don't know where he learned that move.
Why did that happen? Why was that necessary?
He not only stole the guy's belt, he put it on himself, which I thought was an interesting move. It's like, because he's a monk, they also play up the fact that he wants to beat the hell out of these people, literally, but he doesn't want to kill them. So whenever they end up doing things that will kill them, it always has to happen by happenstance. Like one person gets knocked and they're just about to fall out of the train and he's reaching, trying to catch them, even though it's going to endanger all the more people to have them on the train. And even though falling off that train almost certainly will not kill this person, it will just get him off the train. But the person falls because the thing he's holding on to lets go. That just reminded me, by the way, we have to mention the greatest moment in this movie where we have, of the villains, we have, the main villain, which is Arnold Vosloo, and we have his underlings. And one of them is a woman who's incredibly capable. She's the technical person, right? She's shown to be on the ball the entire movie. And the way that she meets her end might be the dumbest thing I've seen, but also the most entertaining. She climbs up to the front of the train to try to stop it. I'm sorry if you were going to mention this anyway, but I got to talk about it now.
No, go for it.
She has a rocket launcher with her, or some sort of bazooka, which they've used earlier very effectively. She has it on her person, I guess just as a way to threaten the conductor, just to make him stop this train. As she's climbing up to the front, she gets it caught on something and accidentally shoots off a rocket that then turns 90 degrees and comes back and blows her and the entire front part of the train, blows them up. Like, she, for a character that's meant to be as capable as probably any that we see in the entire movie, she dies in the dumbest way possible. And of course, hey, maybe God did it, right? I guess maybe we're supposed to think God controlled the rocket and put it right back at her. Like that, you reap what you sow, to coin a phrase.
Exactly. And I think there's a superb little punchline to that thoroughly bizarre sequence where the kind of the rocket comes back and blows up the sort of entire front of the train, but obviously the train has to keep running because this train can't stop, and somebody sort of says, oh, how come the train's still moving, and Lasco says, oh, well, it's a diesel engine. So like as if that explains why the train is still intact after it's been bazookaed.
I like how it seems like within the train no one is aware of what's going on outside the train, right? Like, even the kid sees like a rocket go by at one point, but like there's literally massive explosions and multiple helicopters around the train, and no one seems to be aware that these are happening at all. Even when at the end, when we're jumping to the end, but even when the train runs into a helicopter and the helicopter explodes a million different times, there doesn't seem to be any impression that the people on the train are like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Most of them just seemed like, and there's also another part where the train hits a vehicle that's on the track. No one seems that bothered by that as well.
Even after Arnold Vosloo makes his announcement to everyone on the train that they are, essentially his captives and they're at risk of him poisoning them. You see people in the carriages, like later on after he's done that, they're all just sort of sitting around passing the time. They seem to have taken a very laid back approach to the situation they find themselves in. I guess they're just trusting in God.
Yeah, they have faith, so I guess that
all you need.
trumps common sense every single time.
But just going back to the action here, as you say, the fight scenes, they are actually pretty good. I would agree with you. There's the two in particular where I think it's clear that, as you're saying, Matthijs Landwehr, he knows what he's doing, and whoever they've got impaired with in that scene is obviously somebody who is used to performing fight sequences. But the director does, though, clearly sort of had taken a diploma course from the Michael Bay School of Direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, just constant cutting, right? But I mean, I imagine that's in some ways to hide the limitations of some of the performers here. It's a shame because sometimes you see like a fight between two obviously very capable people, and they'll do like 4 or 5 moves in a row, and there's no editing between it, and it's so much more impactful, and it also it's so much more impressive for someone who enjoys watching martial arts style movies. So yeah, but you're right. Most of the time it's just so many edits that it's hard to tell what is going on.
Whilst this film does take place primarily on a train, there's a sequence at the beginning where they're stealing the virus from this laboratory, and there's a car chase sequence there. And there's some, as somebody who grew up in the 90s watching a lot of PM entertainment movies, where it seemed to be contractually obliged for a car to sort of be blown up and then sort of corkscrew sort of 360 degrees in the air. There was an excellent sequence at the beginning of this movie where we see some vehicles getting blown up and flipped about in sort of time-honoured PM entertainment tradition.
These cars, they get launched. Like, some of them flip like 6 or 7 times in the air. It is actually a very, very impressive stunt. They just decided that they were going to blow the heck out of these vehicles, and it's obviously they had a segment of the street that they could do whatever they wanted with, but there are buildings on either side of it. It is unbelievable how much explosion and explosive carnage that they have managed to achieve there. Yeah, I will say that whatever failings this movie has, the quality of the things blowing up real good is very high. They decided that they were going to put the money where it would be most visually appealing, and also, I think they know their audience. They want to see stuff blown to heck, and that's what they do here.
Amen to that, Doug. Well, you know what? We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action.
I'm Clint.
And I'm Jared.
And we're the hosts of the podcast Alcohollywood,
your source for inebriation,
which you're not listening to right now because this is just a promo for a weekly podcast on all kinds of movies. New, old, good, bad.
Yeah, especially bad.
Plus, we invent a cocktail and a drinking game inspired by each film.
And sometimes we make jokes. Not this time, but sometimes.
Subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher and check out the whole shebang at alcohollywood.com.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. The first comes when the police attempt to stop Voslo escaping with the virus. They order in a helicopter full of commandos to storm and seize the train. As the chopper hovers above the moving carriages, the brave commandos slide down ropes to try and get on board. Unfortunately, the villains have sneakily brought along a rocket launcher as carry-on luggage for their journey. One of the baddies leans out of a carriage window, fires the missile, blowing up the helicopter. The second moment of chopper carnage happens right at the end of the movie. To make his escape, Voslo whistles up his own helicopter to whisk him off the roof of the train. Naturally, Lasco isn't going to allow this, so the pair proceed to have their long-awaited showdown on top of the train. Unsurprisingly, Lasco prevails in the fight, so Voslo pulls out a pistol to shoot our hero. Voslo's aim is inexplicably bad, and he succeeds only in haplessly shooting the pilot of the chopper hovering nearby. Voslo leaps onto the chopper landing ski in the expectation that he'll be flown away, but the mortally wounded pilot can only manage to steer the whirlybird into the path of the onrushing train. Doug, what did you make of all this exploding helicopter carnage?
Like, not just towards the train in some way, like immediately, like straight on. Like, this dying pilot could not have done a better job of flying directly at a train if he was making like a concerted effort. Look, I'm not an expert on exploding helicopters like you are, obviously. I mean, it is kind of your bread and butter, but these are two high quality explosions. They don't use digital effects. You know, this is a very kind of physical, very kind of real feeling. I mean, certainly the situation around them, maybe not so much. But when you see these things explode, it is something that's physical, that has been loaded down with explosives, and they're blowing it up. And you are also seeing it from every angle that you could possibly do it. It does get a little Michael Bay-y in that it's constantly cutting away. We're always seeing the reactions of other people. But if they're going to extend an explosion that in real time would take about like half a second and extend it to like 30 seconds, then you're going to get your money's worth out of these explosions. They obviously had access to a lot of helicopters when making this movie. They even work one into the post-action sequence at the very end to whisk Lasco off for more potential helicopter explosions in the future. Hey, this movie gives us two, what I would say are very high-quality helicopter explosions, both of them very satisfying. In some ways, I think the first one might be a little more satisfying than the second.
Oh, really?
But I do. I think I like, you know what? Maybe it's because I don't see enough rocket launchers being used to turn, and I'm sure, again, you do, turn choppers into giant fireballs. And I did like how it kind of exploded outwards. We're talking about kind of general aesthetics and my own taste in regards to that. The one at the end felt a little Mission Impossible-ish with the fireball kind of coating the front of the train. It also kind of felt very kind of climactic, while the one that came earlier was a bit more of a surprise because it was such a huge action thing sort of at the halfway mark of the movie. But I don't think anyone who's a fan of watching helicopters being blown up could be unsatisfied with how they are presented in this movie.
Now, there are a number of train and helicopter explosions in cinema. You mentioned one of them, which was Mission Impossible, which has a very famous sequence that takes place in the Channel Tunnel, where Jean Reno is piloting this helicopter after the Eurostar train. But there's only one other film, Doug, where you get to see a helicopter ramming or being rammed by a train. Can you name it?
Oh, my goodness. I hesitate to guess. Is it a modern action movie?
It's one from the 80s, and helicopters were central to the entire concept of this movie. So think...
Is it Blue Thunder?
It is Blue Thunder.
Oh!
So at the end...
Well, you know what? There was a time in the early 80s when people were really into helicopters.
Yeah, because you had Airwolf, you had Blue Thunder was a movie, and then it became a TV series as well. So, yeah, Blue Thunder, at the end of that movie, you see Roy Scheider park the Blue Thunder helicopter in front of a train, which then rams into it. And that's another particularly good train-related exploding helicopter. So
yeah, I was surprised when he said, "Smile, you son of a bitch," before it ran into it. I'm sorry.
But you've witnessed here, Doug, a very rare exploding helicopter event. So I hope you feel that you've been brought, that you're now part of a really sort of niche club of people who have witnessed helicopters being blown up by trains.
I feel like I now fully and completely understand your fascination, if not obsession, with the idea of these helicopters exploding in these variety of different ways. I don't know where it fits in the oeuvre of the entire helicopter explosion genre, but I will say that of the ones I've seen, the two that feature in this movie are very high up there on the list.
They certainly are. Right, I think it's time to say the last rites on this podcast. Doug, thanks for joining me on the show. Do you want to take a minute to tell people about your podcasting activities and, kind of where they can find you online?
Absolutely. You can find me. I have two podcasts at the moment. One of them is Eric Roberts is the Effing Man, which you can find at ericrobertsistheman.com. You can also find that on Twitter at ERITFM. That focuses, of course, on the life and work of actor Eric Roberts. Me and my co-host Liam O'Donnell, we made a blood oath to cover everything Eric Roberts has ever made, and we are gonna do it. For those who think that's a ridiculous concept, well, I got to meet Eric Roberts and interview him live on stage, and you didn't. So, la-di-da. I also have another podcast featuring and focusing on low-budget and ultra micro-budget movies, usually made for less than $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. That's called No Budget Nightmares. You can find that at nobudgetpodcast.com or on Twitter at nobudgetpodcast. And you can, of course, find me on Twitter at Doug_Tilley. That's Tilley.
Well, I would heartily recommend anyone listening go out and do yourself a favour, subscribe to their shows. They're both excellent. I thoroughly enjoy listening to them. I was privileged to be on one of your podcasts on the Eric Roberts is the Masking Tape Man, and that was a great fun time talking about another low budget action movie called The Alternate.
Is that what it's called? It's an excellent episode, I think, of Eric Roberts is the Man. And I will say that of the movies that we featured on that program, I think about The Alternate more than almost any other one. To the point where we did ask Eric Roberts some questions about The Alternate when we got to meet him face to face, and he gave us some interesting answers about maybe where that title came from.
Well, like I say, go and check out both of Doug's podcasts. Do yourself a favour. As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website for other reviews of films where helicopters explode. If you like what we do, then show us a little love and spread the word about what we do. It would really help us out. We'll be back soon. So until then, keep looking, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.